I am
Okay, we don't have to until she's
privileged
done.
today to be able to introduce our keynote speaker, Supervisor Sheila Kuehl. She's a graduate of radio, television, and Harvard Law School. She's been a champion of social equity as a public benefit attorney, then in California Senate and Assembly, where she authored 171 bills that were signed into law, including paid family leave. Now she's a county supervisor. In the 2 years since she became supervisor, she has undertaken and collaborated on initiatives to increase the minimum wage, create a sheriff's oversight commission, increase funding and services for homeless residents, increase services and support for relative caregivers of foster children, create the Office of Child Protection, create oversight of the probation department, reform the adult and juvenile justice systems to emphasize second chance and anti-recidivism programs, create a Women and Girls Initiative, bring together 3 county departments into a new integrated agency, and establish a position focused on lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender foster youth, who make up almost 20% of youth in foster care. Supervisor Kuehl exemplifies commitment to social justice, an incisive intellect, and courageous leadership. Thank you for being here today. We are excited to hear about Operation MonkeyWrench. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Supervisor Sheila Kuehl. Thank you, Supervisor.
Dan didn't want to take any chances of moving the mic up and down, so he held it in his hand. I thought that was very sensitive. Gender sensitive, height sensitive, I don't know, sexual orientation sensitive, I have no idea. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you very much for lunch. That was great. You always need a little calories before you put out a lot of energy in a speech, and I expect to put out a lot of energy in the speech. I'm certain that you're hoping that I will too. I've been told that it's always best to start anything you're going to say to people with a story, so I'll tell you a story. There was a woman who was tasked with bringing water to her village. And it was a fairly crude system. She had 2 buckets on a stick that she carried on her shoulders. And every morning she would walk down from the village to the river and fill both the buckets up with water, and then walk back to the village to put them into the common watering place. And every morning she got to the river and she filled up both the buckets. But by the time she got back to the village, though the bucket on the left was full, bucket on the right was only half full. And as might be the case with anyone, the bucket on the right was getting kind of depressed about this, and in very healthy fashion decided one day to speak to the woman about it and said, you know, I'm sorry, I just don't get this. Every day you put both the buckets, my brother and I, on your shoulders, off we go to the river, you fill us both up, you walk back to the village, and though my brother's bucket on the left is still full, I'm only half full, and I'm really getting depressed, and I'm contemplating suicide. I don't know what to do. And she, in very good therapeutic fashion, said, I see. Well, do me a favor. On the way back tomorrow morning, let me just ask you a few questions, okay? Can you hold out till then? And he said, I guess I can. So she puts a bucket on her shoulder. She walks back down to the river the next morning. She fills up both the buckets. And she's walking the road back to the village. And she says to the bucket on the right, okay, I'm going to ask you a few questions. You ready? He says, okay. She says, well, look on the left side of the road. What do you see? And he looks and says, oh, I don't see anything. Left side of the road. Clean. She says, okay, now look at the right side of the road. What do you see? And the bucket says, I see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of flowers. And she says, that's your doing. You simply haven't quite understood your purpose. Now, I offer you that story at the beginning of my remarks for 2 reasons. One is, you can use that story to open any speech you ever make. Because I'll guarantee you they ask you to speak to them because they're wondering about their purpose, or thinking about it, or defining it, or talking about it. And the other reason is because I kind of want to talk about purpose today in this particular setting. Let me start with mine. It's hard to think about a person's purpose in life because it changes as you go along, and then there's all these different sort of gradations of it, different ways of slicing and dicing. So for me, in addition to personal, family, friends kind of thing, though they tend to get integrated when you're an activist, my purpose as it's evolved generally has not involved direct services. I was a camp counselor. Okay, I loved that. I helped people put together a shelter for battered women, but you wouldn't find me doing direct services at the shelter. It's just not me. I didn't excel at it, and it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I taught for a while, and I liked that very much. But one of the things that always sort of affected the way I felt about things was it was hard for me to do some good one person at a time. It felt like that was very important for the people, but for me, I wanted to fix everything at once. So my purpose, as it's evolved for me, has been more about policy, about rules, about changing the rules. It's kind of interesting. I went up to my sister's for Thanksgiving. I have two great nephews. One is 6 and one is 3. The 3-year-old, when you play cards with him, there aren't any rules because you deal it out and he says, I want 3 more. Okay, give 3 more. And then they make up the games as they go along, right? Am I right? Anybody here with a 2 or 3-year-old? It's kind of like, okay, now we're going to put all the cards face down. Okay, fine, The 6-year-old, on the other hand, is all about rules. You have to play fish according to the rules. Go fish. You can't say, ha, 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 go fish. You know what I mean? It's like very precise. And so it makes me think about my life and rules. Because once my students at UCLA talked me into going to law school, because it was important to learn the tools of the enemy during the revolution, so we were going to go to law school, I really found my purpose because it was about understanding where the rules come from, who makes the rules, when to obey them, when not to obey them, when to change them, how to change them, and maybe how to get into a position to change them. So since 94, that's what I've been doing. I've been in government. People call it politics, but to me, politics is what you do when you're running. Governing is what you do after you win. And it's actually different. And so my purpose, breaking the rules, making the rules, adjusting the rules, understanding the rules, and trying to get everybody else to either obey or disobey the rules, which of course we'll come back to in a minute. And also you're kind of let me say, a victim of your own time in terms of purpose, as we now know. Imagine you were living in Paris before the Nazis marched in. You had a nice life. Maybe you saw them coming, maybe you saw them taking over country by country, but you were in Paris. You went in the morning, you bought a baguette, you drank café au lait, you had your work. It might have been revolutionary in its own way. You might have been in the government. And then the Nazis marched in. And what was your purpose after that? It changed radically. You were either in the Vichy government or in the resistance, really. And if you were in the resistance, your life changed really radically because you were at risk every day. And the same thing in terms of, Tori was just telling me about Vivian talking about the abolitionists and how they were really delivered a major setback by the law that said, you had to turn over fugitive slaves, and it was the law. And the question is, do you do that or not? What are you as a movement? The law sometimes will just wipe out, apparently, a lot of the gains that you've made. And what do you do? So what they did was they organized, they pushed back, they resisted, and they also worked for change. And of course, if you wait long enough, change will come, for better or for worse, and sometimes it is for better. So what is our purpose during the time after the Nazis walked into Paris? Because in my opinion, that's where we are now. The Nazis have marched into Paris, not quite into California yet, but you know, that's what they said in Paris about the Loire Valley. So we are on high alert. We are hurting. We are in therapy. We are, I don't know what our therapists are doing because they're hearing so much about how afraid and anxious everybody is. So what I'm suggesting to people is something that I'm calling Operation MonkeyWrench. And a lot of people have said to me, what should I do? And I am going to say to you, I have the vaguest idea what you should do. Or as I said to Tori, they're a think tank. I'm going to tell them, think. There's a purpose for a think tank. Okay. And the reason that I'm not telling people what to do is because I don't even know what you do now. So I don't know where you live. I don't know where you work. I don't know what your family's like. I don't know if you're running for office next year. I don't know if your church or synagogue has, talked about this. They probably have. And I see Operation MonkeyWrench. I mean, we'll have a website, we'll tweet, we'll Facebook, we'll do the things that people do. But the notion is throw a monkey wrench into all the bad stuff, whatever it is, wherever you are. And there might be, I would say, 3 big categories to throw a monkey wrench into things. One of them is by keeping on. That is, we were building and are building towards things. We have plans. We are moving. All the things that you've already heard this morning, in all the areas that we care about and beyond, we were moving and having plans. And what they would like us to do is to be so freaked out that we freeze. Okay? So you want to throw a monkey wrench into that? Don't freeze. We're going to keep on keeping on. And one of the ways, just in many, but I promised people that I would mention it, is on Tuesday, December 13th, Hilda Solis and I are bringing a motion to the supervisors to establish a 5-year Los Angeles County initiative on women and girls. It does sound like an applause line. Yes, it's a wonderful thing. Because this, to me, is a population that hasn't gotten a lot of attention in the past couple of decades, or maybe just one. But there's a lot that can be done. It's not the only group to look at. It's not the only people we care about, but we've got to care about them. So we are going to keep on keeping on. We are going to ask each of our 37 departments to figure out a way that they may or may not, advertently or inadvertently, be treating women and men, boys and girls, slightly differently, just in their expectations or programs or whatever. Ferret that out. Same thing with the county as employer. We have a lot of women in leadership. It's wonderful. However, in some of our departments, ironically, those that are going to get the infrastructure money, if California gets any of it, it's not a majority of women. They're not the builders, they're not the mechanics, etc. So we want to look at that. And everybody says, well, training's not there. Okay, we'll do training. All I'm saying is, as one example, it's a way to keep doing what you're doing. Don't let them convince you that you should stop. I may be talking to the converted already, but I know that there's a lot of depression and a lot of anxiety. And those are crippling experiences. The second thing is push back. Keep on keeping on. Second, push back. That would be against somebody else's action, or probably the federal government right now, though we don't know. There may be some Vichy governments. We have no idea. I'm so glad we have the Nazis and Vichy governments and all that stuff, because it's like shorthand for, they're the bad guys, they're the collaborators, like that. So pushing back might be, and again, I'm going to talk about various levels, but it might be you just don't obey the law in your organization, government, home, something. Push back against what's happening with immigrants. A lot of talk about that. Nothing's happening yet exactly, but a lot of talk. And as soon as the first rule comes down, we push back. We push back not only by what we say and write, but sometimes, we did clinic defense. Now we're going to do immigrant defense. I mean, it's simply going to happen. Our lives are different. And we will be thinking about our purpose. I don't want you to feel like you have to choose among three things. Sometimes you can do all three things. Because you're doing them now. But push back. One way that we might be pushing back in California, 2 state senators called me and said they're suddenly much more interested than they used to be in bringing back single payer. And I had the single payer bill. I got it to the governor's desk twice. Now, I got it there. Most people don't really understand. There was no money in it because no Republican voted for it. It was to go to a Blue Ribbon Commission to design a health care system like Medicare, do away with all of the health insurance companies in the state, except for additional policies like you have with Medicare. And then it had to go out to a vote of the people because it's a tax, right? We were going to tax ourselves to pay for it. So it wasn't a done deal, but bringing it back does a couple of things. One is makes it possible again, and the second is makes it part of the discussion again. So a couple of senators, as I said, state senators, have said that they're interested. I've told them who to talk to. I've made myself available. But it is, again, a way of pushing back if the ACA goes away. I don't know how successful it would be. It could be a 5 or 6 or 7 year thing to do, but it is a way of pushing back. And it also highlights what an opportunity disaster sometimes is. I don't know, maybe people on the Titanic were just regular people, and then they were heroes if they lived. They didn't know they were going to be heroes. They didn't know they'd be hanging on to somebody at the railing so they didn't drop in the water for 4 hours. But, you just brighten the corner where you are. Or in the case of resistance, darken the corner where you are. Either way, it's kind of your choice. And then there is the real way of resisting. And that really, I think, is more risky. We risk arrest. We risk going to jail. How many people in this room have ever been in jail? See? No big risk. The rest of you can talk to them and see they've even kept their plastic handcuffs as kind of, mementos, pictures, old reunions, jail reunions. It's really a good thing to do. Camus said, in peace, we can be who we are. In war, we become what we were not. And so you can take that, I think, in a lot of ways. Right now, maybe we are not protesters, or maybe we are, and will be more. Right now, maybe we're not lawbreakers, and maybe we will. And maybe we'll be called upon to decide whether we want to do that. So in those 3 categories, keep on keeping on, push back, resist, there's also a number of levels that I think we want to look at. One of the things that is most related to the organization here that invited me is the question of what can research do? What can data do? And I know that every time we bring anything as a motion in the county, we talk about how it's data-driven. Now, I think it's only our side of the blanket that really cares about truth anymore. But, okay, we care about it. Why do we care about it? And don't kid yourself, they care about it too. They care about not having truth. They care about not having data. Why? Because the old saying, truth is a defense? I would say to you, truth is a weapon. It's a real weapon. How is it a weapon? Because we say, here is what we need to do. How do I know that? Because I have this data. Here is what we need to do, and I will choose this path. Why choose this path? Because I have the data. So it is very important to have the research and have the data. Sometimes people say to me, what do you want us to do research about? And I think, you know what? I'm a public servant, okay? You're supposed to tell me what's important. I'm not kidding. I have 2 ideas. I've already done them. The 3rd and 4th and 5th have got to come from you. And believe me, they do. From my staff, which is absolutely fabulous, from my constituents, many of whom are very fabulous. My constituents, many of them are the ones that worked out the mountain lion deal. Let me tell you, it was that woman's neighbors that went to talk to her and say, instead of killing the mountain lion, and we've got animals too, let us show you this wonderful enclosure and we'll help you build it. So sometimes the ideas will come from everywhere, and I'm hoping that in the case of what you want government to do, that the ideas in terms of at least research and action will come in part from you. So what are the levels of action? Government. Government has got to resist as government. Everybody's asking us to do it. We will do it in the county. We will do it in LA City. I think half of the 88 cities are already talking about doing it. They don't know what it means yet. Everyone's talking about immigration, but trust me, that's not going to be the only area where we're going to need to do something oppositional. But government will be one of the levels that will be oppositional. In many cases, advocates want the government to do more than it is doing. And there is a clash there. In my opinion, that's fine. Because you tell me what you want, and I'll tell you what I think I can do. You elected me theoretically because you trust me to figure this out. I will be pushing people to do more. Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. But unless there's somebody saying we want more ain't going to get done. So it's important, if you're not in government, to let government know what you think they should do. I personally am not a big fan of a list of demands, but I do like conversation. So just to let you know, in case you're drawing up a list of demands. Another level where I think there can be quite a bit of action are in the nonprofits. Nonprofits are generally very worried. They're worried about funding. They're worried about different funding streams and filling out paperwork so that they continue to get their funding. When Reagan was elected, I was part of a battered women's shelter in Santa Monica. And one of the organizers of that shelter was quite prescient. And she said, I think we better build up our mailing list and get a lot of regular people to support us because the federal money is going to go away. And she was right. And that is the case in a lot of places. So nonprofits, part of the resistance is you've got to build up your list of friends. People gave a lot of money to these elections. They probably would like to help nonprofits as well, so long as they understand what nonprofits are doing. That's one way to push back. The other way is apply for the money, tell them you're going to do what they want, and then don't do it. And then report that you did do it. Okay, I know I said truth is a weapon, but so is lying. Break the rules. It is risky, there's no question. But I have found in some cases that nonprofits are so damn obedient, they truly are frozen. I'm not criticizing anyone who's followed the rules. Believe me, I've done it too. But in these circumstances, I mean, we did the same thing at the shelter. There would be a new pot of money for, children's programs. So in 3 weeks, we had a children's program, which we had already had anyway because we allowed women to bring their children into the shelter. Okay, so we just characterized it as a children's program and applied for $25,000, and then we used it, didn't we, Viv? So, use it, use them, make it work, cheat, lie. Are we recording? So I'm not saying this so that you won't trust politicians, because as I said, I'm not a politician at the moment, I'm an elected. And you can certainly trust electeds. Okay. The third category, think tanks. I've already said what I would really like you to do, the major verb, is to think. But I do think that you do more than research. You decide what to research. You decide what needs to be known. You decide not to shape it so that it comes out one way or another, but to make certain that you have explored all the corners. The work that you did on the minimum wage, for instance, was very different than the work done by other researchers on the minimum wage. And it really helped us to articulate why that would help people in all 5 districts. That it wasn't, because everyone thinks the 3rd district is just rich white people, which is, tell them that in Sylmar and Pacoima, which is in my district. But think tanks need to think, research, decide what to research, and make sure that it gets out. Stuff that I don't have to tell you, but it can also be revolutionary. What is the terrible downside of something the government has done? What is the opposite? The data that shows that what the government is saying, I'm saying federal government in this case, is not true. Don't you want to send a bulletin every week to Ohio? Got your job back yet? He lied to you. How about this week? Working yet? I mean, the research will show they're not. That's how we theoretically take it back in 4 years, because we have to show the people who trusted him that it was misplaced trust, that he was not on their side, nothing he's done is really helping them, et cetera, et cetera. Another category, organizations, which may be different from nonprofits, because in your organization, you may be organizing. You may be developing an agenda for someone. There's a broader sort of issue. And I think of agencies in this category as well. And again, it's a matter of apply for the money, take the money, use it the way you want to, and tell them you did what they wanted. And I'm really not kidding. We have to be very creative, because otherwise we're going to lose billions of dollars in California. They want to punish us already. So let us not let them. Let us be very creative. The next category really are our families. It wasn't only the young women who were devastated by the election, but if you've got a daughter between the age of, 6 and 22, they were probably pretty devastated. They don't know what to do. Hopefully, your sons feel the same, and many of us. So what can we do in our families? There may be small acts, random acts of kindness. There may be things we can do as a family. Some of them seem sort of plebeian, but if we went as a family and brought flowers to a mosque, especially one who had been painted with something. If you are with your kid in a market and somebody insults a woman in line on the basis of whatever, her race or sexual orientation or whatever, or her looks, step up. I know you will anyway, but it's a wonderful thing to do with your kids. They will see that this kind of resistance is also very important. And of course, the last category really is each of us as an individual. You just have to decide what you're going to do, but you've got to do something. And I will do what I can in all of those levels to throw a monkey wrench into any bad act, not just the federal government, but right now that's what it looks like, where it looks like a lot of it will be coming from. So that's really what Operation Monkey Wrench is. It's not a list of here's what you can do on Monday. It is essentially a call to action for each person to think for themselves and to act in any way that will provide resistance. Now, we will be an organized resistance, too, in many ways. We will be marching together. We will be taking action together. We will be planning together. And I want all of that to happen. Two things are important about that. One is, I've heard somebody say, do you realize there's going to be 2 women's marches at the same time? And I say, oh, wonderful. But they didn't mean it as a wonderful thing. They thought there was something wrong with that. And I'm thinking so I'll organize one on my block. What do you care? You know, as long as everybody's out there marching, and they can call it a women's march. How many honorary women do I see in this audience? Every man ought to raise their hand immediately, if you don't mind. Okay, you are invited to the Women's March. Because, of course, it's not about women. It's about who's organizing the march. Doesn't matter. Want to go to an LGBT march and you're straight? Go! Do what you can, you know, where you can. Don't think about conflict. That's my feeling. If you're doing something and I'm doing something on the same day, often we spend a lot of energy worrying about whether we're going to get enough people. I don't care. Things should happen every day. One of the important things is to let everybody else know what's happening. You know, one of those community calendar ideas that everybody's always talking about. Maybe we'll have a resistance calendar on the MonkeyWrench website. I don't know. It will be incomplete, but it will be good. So I submit to you, this is purpose. Not exactly the purpose we were thinking of necessarily at the beginning of November, but I think if each of us keeps to our own vision, if each of us is the person we want to be or wanted to be when we grew up, then it will be possible for us to carry the water and grow the flowers. Thank you very much.